Hi, Don from White House Music Waukesha. As I'm being safer at home, I'm finding myself with a lot more time to play my instruments. However, it's dawned on me that there's plenty of students out there who have less access to their band director and no access to their music store and don't know how to take basic day-to-day care of their trumpet. So I'm going to show you how to just oil your valves, grease your slides, keep your trumpet working properly until we can all get back together. Here we go. Okay, let's start with oiling your valves. One of the first questions I'm asked by students is, how often should I oil my valves? The answer I give them is as often as is possible. You can't oil too often. It's kind of like putting oil in your car. You want to do it before it needs it. Shortcut the students will try to take that I don't recommend is they'll just flip their trumpet over, try to dribble some oil into these little holes here. But if you look at the way a piston is constructed, the bottom of the piston has a little divot there. The oil just ends up pooling there. Then when you put it back right side up, the oil just kind of ends up dripping out on the ground. Better to pull out the piston and oil it properly. A lot of trumpet cases do a really nice job of providing you with a workbench. You can lay your trumpet flat, you can access your pistons. If your case doesn't allow you to do that, you want to make sure you work on a nice flat, safe surface, and always put your trumpet down with the slides up. If you put it down with the slides down, you risk denting that second valve slide, and that can cause you problems with your pistons later on. So once you've got your trumpet lying down safely, you're going to unscrew the cap. I never remove all three pistons unless I'm giving my trumpet a complete bath. If you pull the piston up, you only need to oil the bottom half of the piston here. And really just a couple drops will do ya. Again, I like to oil inside my case if I can, because if I drip, worst thing that happens, gets inside of my case. Now when I put my piston back in place, if I turn the piston gently, it'll lock in place where it belongs. There's a little plastic guide here that helps align the piston. On some brands of trumpet, it is possible for that guide to click in backwards. So if you finish oiling your trumpet and you can't put air through it, the first thing I do, check to make sure those guides didn't lock in backwards. And by pulling my pistons one at a time, I don't have to worry about getting them confused. Pistons look pretty similar outside of the trumpet. It can be really easy for a student to get them confused and put the wrong piston back in the wrong spot. If that happens, I'll show you in a minute what you can do. Down to my last piston. And you'll notice I'm not putting a lot of oil on. 2 or 3 drops, and it just kind of runs around the piston. Turn it till it clicks. And put everything back together. Valve oil will evaporate, so if you oil your pistons and you don't play for a couple of days, it can still need oil even if you haven't been playing it. But that's all there is to oiling your pistons on a day-to-day basis. I did talk about if you get them mixed up. I've never encountered a trumpet that doesn't have the piston number somewhere on it. So on my Getson trumpet here, it is right here on the side of the valve, and the valve numbers are usually 1, 2, 3 going away from the player. Again, put it in, click it in place, and my pistons are now properly oiled. Another thing you may need to do is grease the slides on your trumpet. There are 4 slides on your trumpet. You want to make sure you keep them all moving freely. The one that moves most often is the main tuning slide. As you become a little bit more advanced, your first and third valve slides will come into play for intonation. You really don't ever move your second valve slide, but you still want to keep it properly greased and moving. So, to grease a slide, you're just going to remove the slide gently. Wipe off the old grease with a good old paper towel. And in your slide grease of choice, just a little dab on your finger will do it. Rub it around the ends and then spread it down the slide. When you put the slide back in the trumpet, it's going to push the grease further down there. So you really need to make sure you cover these ends because the rest of it's going to slide into place on its own. There you go. Now another tip, your third valve slide, for those of you who are playing at a level where you're intonating your low D, low C sharp, you want that to move a little bit more freely. So I'm going to clean off the old grease here. Grease it up with some fresh grease. And we're back in business, but that's a little stiffer than I'd like it to be. So I'm just going to take a drop of valve oil. And that's going to mix with the grease a little bit and allow me to work that third valve slide just a little bit quicker. You're going to do the same thing with slides 1 and 2. And there we are. Everything is back together and working properly. And that's all it takes to take day-to-day care for your trumpet. Well, there you have it. We've oiled our pistons, we've greased our slides. Oil those pistons before they need it. Every day it'd be great. Every other day will probably do the job just fine for you. As far as greasing the slides, you'll feel when they get a little bit stiff on you. Grease them up. If you're the average kid playing once a day, probably oil them in 3-4 weeks. If you have any questions, first thing to do, reach out to your band director. Second thing, contact us. info@whitehousemusic.com. Everybody stay home, stay safe, keep playing.